Stand next to me.
Okay, there. Okay.
Just not next to me.
We're glad you do whatever she tells us.
100%. I'm a smart man.
I just want to say hello to everyone. We try to get started on time. We have a wonderful program planned for today. And I have some brief announcements that I'd like to make. First of all, my name is Susan Bransfield. I am the president of the Portland Historical Society, and I'm happy to see so many people here today. And on behalf of our sponsors, which include the Portland Historical Society, the Middlesex County Historical Society, the Portland Committee on Solidarity, and the Portland Library, we'd like to say hello and welcome you to Voices of Portland, the Fight for Freedom and Equality from 1776 to 2026, a Black History Month event. We're looking forward to the wonderful program we have planned, and we want to say many thanks to Mary Mackey, Liz Hibino, Barbara Shaw, who is, and myself. It's a wonderful committee, and we've worked together so well, and we hope this is one of many programs to present. But first, I am very pleased to welcome and introduce our official welcome agent today, who is the first selectman of the town of Portland, Mr. Michael Pelton. And before Michael comes to the podium to say hello,
I'm backing off.
I want to say hello to Representative Christy Carpino, who is here. She's in the back. Thank you, Christy. And I also want to say hello to our town clerk, Mike Tierney. I know Andrea Alfano is here from our Board of Selectmen. And there may be, are there any other members of our elected group here today? We're just so happy to have everybody here. And now, I give you Michael Pelton.
All right. Thank you, Susan, so much. I just had a few things I wanted to say today because I didn't want to slow this whole thing down. I cannot believe how many people are here. This is fantastic. Is that better? Oh, there, very good. Anyways, so I'm excited about what to hear today. I know the groups that have put this together have worked really hard on this, so I am looking forward to hearing more voices of Portland, hearing more stories, and these are the kind of things that we need to hear, especially nowadays. Where we came from, where we're going. We need to understand ourselves, our town, and the communities that we have here. So with that, I want to pass it on to the next person, but I'm just excited to be here. Thank you very much.
You can't see me if I stand behind the podium. I'm gonna come over here. All right, can you see me? Hi. Thank you, Mike. I am Liz Hibino, one of the Voices committee members. And the Voices of Portland project started in 2024. We worked with Portland Library, the Portland Schools, and Connecticut Valley Music and Dance to produce 2 Black History Month panel events and a podcast interview. And part of the inspiration for Voices of Portland was our work with Barbara Shaw and David Rowan, her brother, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. They just told us so many stories of growing up in Portland while we were working with them on the Juneteenth celebration. And we realized we really needed to capture and share these stories. So this year we decided to invite local historians to share and community leaders to uncover even more Portland history. And we'll also have a special presentation by a Portland High School student. And just to mention too, after the event, you'll be able to have the chance. Do you want to? No. Okay, we're gonna make it work. You will have the chance to look at some pictures and documents and articles in the back of the room, and learn more about the NAACP, which we'll hear about today, and our Voices of Portland book, which was made, transcribed by Mary Mackey and made from all of the podcasts and presentations that we have worked on. So now I'm going to let Barbara speak, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the inspiration for our project.
Good afternoon. This is very important to me because my mother was very involved in the Portland community that a lot of people don't realize that down under the bridge was a thriving community. It is not what it looks like now. There were houses. There was Smith's Luncheonette that was in the center, True Vine Holiness Church. There was renters, homeowners. So this, with the Voices, we started, it was a whim. I went to the library at a meeting and I mentioned to Jen, for Black History, this is something that I wanted to do. I didn't know if it was going to happen. And look where we are now. And today I am lucky to have, so people can see faces of people that I have talked about. And I know my mother probably is looking down and proud of me. I am carrying on what my mother did. I was there growing up and I paid attention because it was important. I have two special women that I have known, and both of them today, my heart just to see them, because I have not seen them, to talk. The first person I like to speak about is Mrs. Odessa Buttram. Mrs. Buttram, besides her own children, she was Mother Buttram. Everyone could go to the Buttrams. The door was always open. And they knew that they could look on her. She would give them advice. And it's important to me that she is here. Mrs. Buttram was there when down under the bridge. Then when redevelopment came and everybody had to move out, Mrs. Buttram lives in Chatham Court that was built. She is the only surviving original tenant of Chatham Court. And that is important to me because that was my mother's baby. She will tell you, and my mother said it was not a project. We lived in a development, and do not call it a project. So I thank you, Mrs. Buttram, for everything, and you just done my heart warm to have you because I've been working, trying to get you, and like I told them, she is a very, very private woman. She's not going to speak. And that's what I told her granddaughter, Vicki, just please bring her. She doesn't have to say anything, just sit there. But I wanted to put a face so people will know who she is. The other person that was involved is Mrs. Thelma Chatfield. My mother worked for Community Action, and Thelma was one of the people that, if there was something at the center, my mother would say, Thelma, we're having such and such, you need to be there. Thelma would come, but at 1 o'clock, she would tell my mother, I have to go, I gotta go home and watch my stories. And my mother would go, okay, she goes, but I'll be back. And my mother had a bond with Thelma, and she worked with Thelma to then stories were no longer important. She didn't have to leave. And I am proud to say, besides her being here, her daughter, Joanne, Dawn, her son, Marvin, they're all grown up, but I remember when they were babies and growing up and seeing them, and to see them now as adults. And it's because of Thelma too, in the neighborhood, the kids would go there, and if they needed something to eat, she would feed them, never, no questions asked. So it does my heart that I have these two women, because basically these are the only two left of the original Chatham Court residents. Everybody else is gone. And it does my heart that they are here, that I get to see them. Because I haven't, Thelma, I haven't seen you. And I just want you to know, as long as I have breath, I don't live in Portland anymore, but Portland is still home to me. And it is important to me that the newbies need to know what about Portland and the African American population that lived in Portland. We are part of Portland's history. And as long as I have breath, I'm not going to let anybody forget. Thank you.
Barbara, that was very special. Thank you for joining us, our special guests. And we also wanted to dedicate this event to Grace Smith Larry, Aunt Gracie. Some of you were here a few years ago for her great granddaughter?
Great niece.
Great niece, Brooklyn Grant's presentation with the Historical Society about Grace Smith Larry, and we that was another inspiration for Voices of Portland, and the stories are included in the book, which is at the Historical Society table. If there are not enough copies today, you can sign up to purchase one in the future if you're interested. And Aunt Gracie passed away recently, so we wanted to acknowledge that and thank her family for everything that they've done. And Brooklyn also, I don't think are any of the Grant family here? I don't think they could make it, but Brooklyn is, there was an announcement by the Middlesex NAACP that she's the recipient of a Youth Leadership Award this year for her work on that story and being part of the Voices of Portland project. So we're all very proud of that. Great, so we're just thrilled to have this big turnout. We hope you have all found a seat. If you didn't, let somebody at a table know and we'll try to help you find a seat. There's a few in front too. There's about 5 seats up in front still. So today I am really thrilled to welcome our speakers, and our first speaker will be John Mills. John is an author, a trained genealogist, and a descendant of the enslaved, and he's also the president of the Alex Brienne Corporation, a Connecticut-based nonprofit. The Alex Brienne Corporation focuses on researching, interrogating, and presenting lesser-known stories of the American enslaved. John unearths little-known people with intent to inject them into the landscapes of the communities where they lived, worked, or died. He then finds current-day descendants and gives them back their history.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate it. Often when I talk, it's kind of off the top of my head, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Most of the time it's bad. But today I prepared what I was going to say because there's all this information that I wanted to get out. So I'm going to read from what I prepared. It's an honor to speak here in Portland. I appreciate it, Liz, for inviting me here to speak. But before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that today marks the 61st anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X, who was gunned down on February 21st, 1965 at the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights, Manhattan, shortly after 3 p.m. It's not lost on me that we're here talking Black history at the exact moment he was, 61 years ago today. In talking about equality as it relates to the importance of knowing African American history, Malcolm once said, "When you know the origin, you know the cause. If you don't know the origin, you don't know the cause. And if you don't know the cause, you don't know the reason." Malcolm challenged America to confront the gap between its ideals and its realities. And he called for dignity, self-determination, and justice for African Americans. As a kid, growing up in the 70s in California, listening to his words gave me incredible insight and pride, and it still does today. His life and death remind us that the struggle for equality did not begin in the 20th century, nor did it end there. It is part of a long continuum, one that stretches back to the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, when Black men and their families fought, sacrificed, and persevered in a nation that had yet to fully recognize their freedom or citizenship. Today, as we explore their stories, we honor the life of Malcolm X and that enduring struggle for liberty and equality. When I think about Portland and its history, I think about brownstone and quarries and river trade and shipbuilding. I think about hard work. But today I want to invite you to see Portland through another lens. Imagine this town in the 1860s. A young Black teenager leaves his home here, travels to New Haven to enlist in the Union Army. A middle-aged laborer credited to this town marches south to fight in a war that will redefine freedom in America. A 43-year-old man connected to Portland endures military service, dying at a Confederate prison camp. His life we can only partially trace. These are not distant stories, they are Portland stories. And they are part of a much longer American story, one that stretches back to the Revolutionary War, when Black men fought for liberty, even while they themselves remained enslaved. Today, as we gather during Black History Month and in the 250th anniversary year of the Declaration of Independence, I want to speak about men who believed in the promise of freedom long before that promise was fulfilled for them. Men who fought for a country that did not fight for them. Men whose service forces us to ask what liberty meant and what it still means. 250 years ago, a new nation proclaimed that all men are created equal and endowed with the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words would inspire revolutions, shape democracies, and echo across the world. But here in Connecticut and throughout the colonies, those words also entered a society where liberty was selective, freedom conditional, and equality unfinished. When we think about the American Revolution, we often imagine farmers and tradesmen taking up arms in the name of liberty. But black men, both free and enslaved, also fought. Some were promised freedom, some were paid wages, many received neither, and many returned from service still enslaved. Their sacrifices were real, but their freedom was not. Let me share 3 Connecticut examples. Prince Mortimer of Middletown was born in West Africa and enslaved in Connecticut. During the Revolution, he was a servant to officers, including George Washington. Yet he returned from war still enslaved. Freed in the 1792 will of his enslaver, that freedom was short-lived. He was re-enslaved when the will was overturned. In 1811, Prince would be imprisoned at age 87, accused of attempting to poison his new enslaver, George Starr. Prince later died at Wethersfield Prison after spending 23 years in prison. While Prince lived long enough to see the birth of a nation he helped create, that promise was never fulfilled for him. Robin Starr in Danbury, enslaved in 1777, enlisted in the Revolution in 1777 while enslaved. His enslaver was a man named Josiah Starr, a distant cousin of George Starr of Middletown, one of the enslavers of Prince Mortimer. Robin's enslaver promised he could purchase his freedom for 40 pounds. Robin paid 22 pounds. Then he left to fight in the Revolutionary War. He served 4 years. When he returned, his enslaver had died, but the promise did not. He still owed the remaining 18 pounds to the heirs of his enslaver. So he paid with his war wages, then went back to war. He served until 1783. At discharge, he received the badge of military merit from George Washington. Yet his name is scarcely known to this state, nor to the country. By the way, there were only 3 other people in the state of Connecticut that received that award. At discharge, Robin Starr, decades later, 3 of Robin Starr's grandsons and 1 great-grandson would fight in the Civil War. 2 of them dying at war, never returning. This is a lineage of service built on sacrifice, but they are not alone. Job Lathrop of Norwich, Connecticut, fought at the Battle of Trenton, crossing the Delaware with George Washington. He returned from war still enslaved. A local resident, so disturbed by this, purchased his freedom, then freed him. Job would then use his war wages to purchase the freedom of his wife, but he was unable to free his 1-year-old son. That child remained enslaved for nearly another 3 decades. Generations later, 2 of Job's great-grandsons would serve in the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment, pictured on the screen. That family was another lineage of service unknown to most. What do these stories reveal? White patriots fought for independence from Britain, but black men fought to be seen as equal against racism and for independence from bondage. White soldiers fought to preserve rights they already possessed, but black soldiers fought to become human beings in the eyes of the law. The contradiction is stark, the courage undeniable. 80 years later, the nation faced another defining conflict. Nearly 180,000 black men served in the United States colored troops. They fought not only to save the Union, they fought to destroy slavery. They fought to redefine citizenship. They fought to make the Declaration's promise real. Because we are gathered here in Portland, it is fitting that we remember the black Civil War soldiers credited to this town. Their lives remind us that the national story of freedom was lived out in local communities like this one. Private Alfred L. Mosley was born on April 10, 1847, the eldest son of David Mosley, a mechanic born in East Haddam, and Louisa Deshay, who was born in Norwich. They lived in the portion of Chatham that had become Portland by 1841. On August 9, 1864, Alfred traveled to New Haven to enlist in the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment, listing his occupation as a farmer. Although he was enlisted in the 29th wasn't there. They were aboard a transport ship leaving South Carolina for Virginia to begin fighting in the Richmond-Petersburg campaign. Alfred was to be sent to meet up with them. But 1 month later, Captain Murray reported that he believed Alfred was only 15 years old. In truth, Alfred was 17. But at 5 foot 1 inches tall, Captain Murray didn't believe him. So Alfred was discharged for being underage and sent back to Portland. Even in his brief service, we see something powerful. A young black teenager from Portland willing to risk his life for a country still defining his place within it. Private Mark D. Babcock was born around 1821 in Hopkinton, Rhode Island. In 1839, he married Rachel Shessex in North Stonington. He worked as a farmer. After disappearing from records for more than 2 decades, he reappeared in 1864, enlisting for the Civil War in New Haven, credited to this town, Portland. On March 19, 1864, he was assigned to the 30th Connecticut Colored Regiment, a regiment that was redesignated the 31st United States Colored Troops the previous day. By June, the regiment, still forming, was rushed to Virginia because the need for Union troops was so great. During the siege of Petersburg, Private Mark Babcock appears to have been captured and sent to Camp Sumter at Andersonville, Georgia. Over 45,000 Union soldiers were imprisoned there. Nearly 13,000 died from disease and starvation. Private Mark Babcock was one of them. He died on July 1st, 1864, buried at Andersonville National Cemetery. Private Babcock gave his life fighting for freedom and never came home. Born in Portsmouth, Virginia, Private Lewis White is documented as enlisting while living in Portland in February of 1864. But he was instead credited to Hamden. His story reminds us that the historical record is imperfect. It reminds us that recovering black history often requires careful investigation. And it reminds us that even errors in records reflect a broader truth. Black soldiers were present, they served, and they mattered. Private James Bell enlisted in New Haven on March 19, 1864, at age 40. He was born in New Jersey, worked as a waiter. His service was credited to this town. He served through the entire war and mustered out on November 7th, 1865. I don't know what became of Private Bell. After the war, he may have come back. He may not have made it back. We just don't know. But what we do know, he stayed the entirety of the war. He served, he endured, and he helped preserve the Union. Even after the Civil War ended, equality remained elusive. Daniel Stanley Lathrop, a black Civil War veteran from New Haven, returned home after risking his life in service to the nation. When he sought to continue serving by joining the Connecticut National Guard, he was told they did not allow black men. Despite his Civil War service, he was denied acceptance. Not because of ability, but because of race. The war had ended, but the struggle, even here in Connecticut, had not. Decades later, during World War I, black soldiers again answered the nation's call. National Guard troops from various states, including Connecticut, were sent to France to work in coordination with French troops. Lawrence Reddick, curator of the Schomburg collection at the New York Public Library, uncovered documents revealing that the American Army had instructed French authorities to treat Black American soldiers as inferior. French officers were warned against praising American Black soldiers, suggesting that it would make white soldiers feel bad about themselves. They were told to avoid allowing social contact between American Black soldiers and French women, suggesting that they may rape their women. Men sent to fight for democracy in World War I abroad, while their own government worked to diminish their humanity. This was not merely prejudice. It was long-standing policy that dated back to the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, which I believe is why you don't know a whole lot about soldiers in those conflicts. What does this tell us? From the Revolution to the Civil War to World War I, Black Americans repeatedly fought for a nation that struggled to recognize their full humanity. Yet they served, they sacrificed, they believed in a promise larger than the reality they experienced. So why must we revere them today? We revere them, these men, because freedom has never been inevitable nor free. It has been demanded, defended, expanded, because greatness is not encapsulated in this term patriot. It's not defined by rights you already possess. Greatness exists in your character, in the principles you believe in, and in your actions that align to both. Know that the expansion of liberty has often been driven by those denied it. As we mark 250 years since the Declaration of Independence, we celebrate, but we also reflect. The Declaration did not complete freedom, it began it. The promise of liberty was unfinished in 1776, and in many ways it remains unfinished today. On a personal note, on April 21st, 2026, a couple months from now, my book, The Narrative of Primus, A Lineage Woven into America's History, will be released. It explores the lives of many of the men I spoke of today and examines the broader landscape shaping Black Americans' pursuit of service and freedom. You can use that link or that QR code if you want to pre-order the book. In closing, during Black History Month, we remember these men. During this anniversary year, we reflect. Today, we honor people who believed in freedom before freedom believed in us. People whose courage has helped transform this meaning of liberty in America. Their stories remind us freedom is not a static inheritance, it is a living responsibility. So ask yourself, how do you plan to contribute to that fight? God bless you is my prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was very inspirational. And I'm also pleased to say that John is very generously recording this event so that we can share this presentation with those who couldn't come, and you can refer back to it. Our next speaker is Jesse Nasta, and he is a historian of slavery, emancipation, and their aftermaths, with a particular focus on New England. A cultural, public, and community historian, he has taught in Wesleyan University's African American Studies Department since 2017 and has been executive director of the Middlesex County Historical Society in Middletown since 2020. And I'll let Jesse do the rest of his introduction.
Thank you so much. So Mine will be a little more conversational with a lot of images. Just to give credit and acknowledgement, so I've been working with John Mills for about 5 years now, since he began this project, and what I most admire is how he tells Black history one individual at a time. Oftentimes it'll be, why doesn't this Black Civil War hero have a gravestone? And then make sure that they have one, and then make sure that their descendants know where the grave is located and connects with them, which is remarkable. I also want to acknowledge and thank the Voices of Portland project, which, as you heard, has been going on for almost 2 years, has been doing remarkable work. And I hope you all either have the book or you will order the book that's on the back table there. In thinking about the Voices of Portland project, really at the core of that project, in addition to everyone who made it possible, Mrs. Barbara Shaw and her brother, David Rohn, their memories and their oral history and their lived experience, I think, were the heart and core of the Voices of Portland project. And as you'll read in that book, and as you'll hear, is their memories, as transmitted to them from their mother, really go back to Portland a century ago, to the 1920s, at the very beginning of the Great Migration of African Americans from the South to Connecticut. Again, that goes back a century. We learned from them about the early history of True Vine Holiness Church, about the shad cannery, the fishing cannery that attracted a lot of those from the South who came to Portland, the Rogers and Hubbard Fertilizer Company, which was one of the first employers of African Americans in Portland from the South. A century might sound like a long time, and it kind of is, but I also want to focus my comments right now on the century and a half of Black community life in this area that laid the foundation for the Great Migration in the 1920s. So my point, to reiterate that, is by the time African Americans from the South were arriving here in the 1920s to Portland, there had been a Black community in Middletown and Portland since 1661. So for 250 years before the Great Migration, before the 1920s. The Black community in this area, therefore, predates the American Revolution by 114 years, before 115 years before the Declaration of Independence. And what I want to talk about today really coincides so nicely with John Mills' comments, thinking about the American Revolution as an unfinished revolution, especially as far as freedom and equality for African Americans goes, that the American Revolution was not a war for liberty for African Americans. And they made it so, but that took centuries, right? So thinking about, I want to just show some images here. By the American Revolution, okay. So let me start by just setting the stage a little bit. As most of you know, Portland was incorporated in 1841. So before 1841, what is now Portland was, as you heard from John Mills, the town of Chatham. And Chatham included present-day Portland and East Hampton. Before 1767, this was called this was part of Middletown, or was also called East Middletown. So when you think about Chatham as a town that existed from 1767 to 1841, I want to point out that in East Hampton and Marlborough, a lot of the people of color who lived there were descendants of the Wangunk, the indigenous people of this area. So there was an important Wangunk community in Marlborough and East Hampton, what was then part of Chatham, really up to the present day. The Wangunk, the indigenous people of this area, have been in this area for up to 10,000 years. So when we're thinking about timeline, indigenous history brings us back 10,000 years instead of 250 years. But Portland proper, in 1841, Portland was incorporated as a separate town. And at that time, the 1850 census showed that in Portland here, there were only, the census taker only counted 5 people of color in Portland in 1850. And in 1860, there were only 10. So my point is that in the 19th century, before the Great Migration, Portland was something like 99-point-something% white. The incredible stories of Civil War service that John Mills mentioned were really among the only handful of free African Americans living in Portland during the Civil War. It was only afterwards, during the Great Migration, that a significant, numerically significant population of African Americans was in Portland. The best explanation I could give is really Portland Brownstone, the Portland Quarry, certainly brought a lot of immigrants from Ireland to Portland, a lot of Swedish immigrants, but really until the 1920s, until the Great Migration, African Americans were almost entirely shut out of the quarry, out of employment, industrial employment. And that's really didn't change until the Great Migration. So the Portland Brownstone Quarry helped build Portland, but they were not hiring African Americans. So that's why the community here remained so small until the 1920s. How did Northern slavery gradually end? I want to emphasize that it was some historians have said, in the past they said the American Revolution sort of ended Northern slavery. That is not true. That is at best a half-truth. The American Revolution, at the time of the American Revolution, there were enslaved people in every New England colony. There were about 5,000 here in Connecticut, and the American Revolution did not abolish slavery. As you heard, you had 200 black men from Connecticut alone who fought in the Revolution for American independence, and then many of them went home and remained enslaved for additional years, sometimes for the rest of their lives. I want to emphasize that during the Revolution, the Connecticut legislature passed a law saying enslavers could free those who fought, but did not have to free those who fought. And that's how you got situations in which Prince Mortimer of Middletown, for example, fought in the Revolution and then remained enslaved and then incarcerated till he died at 110. These harrowing stories, right? In 1784, a year after the American Revolution, the Connecticut legislature did pass a law called gradual emancipation, saying if you were born in 1784, or after, you would be freed at age 25. If you were already alive in 1784, the law did not free you. So really what we see here is that even after the Revolution ended, lawmakers were much more concerned about the property rights of enslavers than freedom for enslaved people. They thought that if reparations were due, they really thought it was the enslaver who was due reparations for their loss of enslaved property as opposed to freedom for the enslaved. But I want to remind you, and this goes back to what John Mills was saying, the enslaved themselves didn't wait around for lawmakers to free them, didn't wait around for gradual emancipation laws. Hundreds of them enlisted in an effort to gain freedom. And what I also find remarkable, and everyone should know this, is that even during the Revolution, enslaved people in New England were already petitioning the government and pointing out the hypocrisy of the Revolution in a slave-holding colony. I just want to quote one petition from 1774 from Massachusetts. It said, quote, "The petition of a great number of blacks detained in a state of slavery in the bowels of a free and Christian country humbly showeth that your petitioners apprehend that they have in common with all other men a natural and unalienable right to that freedom which the great parent of the universe bestowed equally on all mankind. They cannot but express their astonishment that it have never been considered that every principle from which America has acted in the course of their unhappy difficulties with Great Britain pleads stronger than 1,000 arguments in favor of your petitioners." So even as the revolution was going on, this contradiction, this hypocrisy between proclaiming life, liberty, and happiness for all while holding enslaved people was being petitioned by the enslaved themselves. This is a famous drawing of two African-American men who enlisted in the 1st Rhode Island, which was an all-black regiment. This is a copy of the original petition I just told you about from 1774. So this is a very difficult, painful document, but how did slavery actually end if lawmakers didn't free anyone who was already alive? And during and after the Revolution, you had hundreds of enslaved people in the North who seized freedom in their own hands by escaping. And what people might be shocked to realize that this is an ad for an enslaved man who escaped in Middletown, Connecticut in 1793. This is certainly not from the South. And I also want to point out that it says he went out without his pass. So all of those laws that you associate with Southern plantations, passes, curfews, patrols, all were in place in New England as well. This was, there's nothing particularly Southern about slavery, despite what the mythology is. But I also want to point out that within a few years of the Revolution, by the late 1780s, free black communities were forming throughout the North and free black churches were forming throughout the North. So by the late 1780s, within a few years of the Revolution, you had the first Black Methodist church in Philadelphia, for example, Mother Bethel Church. And within Connecticut, by the late 1810s, a generation after the Revolution, you had the first free black churches that I just want to say laid the foundation for the free black communities and free black churches that you saw a century later in the context of the Great Migration to the North. Middletown's Cross Street Amy Zion Church celebrated its 200th anniversary in 2023. So they were one of the first three black churches in Connecticut, forming in 1823 in Middletown. And I just want to juxtapose, I think this is really powerful to see that on the left you have a newspaper advertisement from Middletown, which is advertising a person of African descent as property, as an enslaved person who escaped. And a generation later, you have a newspaper advertisement from Middletown saying that an independent black church was built and was having its opening on Cross Street in Middletown, to juxtapose sort of slavery versus community autonomy and freedom just within a generation. This map is so important because this is now Wesleyan's campus. This was the first site of the Cross Street Amy Zion Church on Cross Street, which is where the Science Center is. And this is what is now called the Beeman Triangle. And this is so important because within 20 years of the church forming, the Beeman family laid out the Beeman Triangle as one of the first free and property-owning free black communities in New England. My research really focuses on the Beeman Triangle, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Beemans and the Beeman Triangle in a moment. For those who don't know the Beemans, I want everyone to know the Beemans and they're part of this lineage. This is Reverend Jehiel Beeman, and a few years ago, I was part of a dozen or so people who renamed the middle school in Middletown Beeman Middle School. So you might know the name Beeman Middle School. Previously it had been Woodrow Wilson Middle School, and Woodrow Wilson, as you might know, fired the last black federal employees during the 1910s. So he was a staunch segregationist and white supremacist. So it was a real victory to rename this school after one of the freedom fighters of Middletown, the black freedom fighters and abolitionists of Middletown. The Beeman family ties in so closely to the legacy of the revolution and the promise of the revolution and the ideals of the revolution, and how black New Englanders seized freedom from the ideals of the revolution. For those who don't know the story, Reverend Beeman's father, Caesar Beeman, had been enslaved in Colchester in the 1780s. He enlisted in the Continental Army in place of his enslaver. And unlike Prince Mortimer, he actually did gain his freedom by fighting in the Revolution. And I think this is just an incredible document. In 1855, William Cooper Nell, one of the first black historians in the United States, wrote a history of the, quote, colored patriots of the American Revolution to stress that thousands of black men had fought in the Revolution for independence. And Reverend Beeman gave this quote. He said, Reverend J.C. Beeman, he says, when his father was presented with manumission papers, he was asked what name he had selected and replied he had always loathed slavery and wanted to be a man. Hence, he adopted the name Beeman. So that's the name, which I think is just remarkable. And some previous local historians had said this was a legend, but we have it here in Reverend Jehiel Beeman's own voice, that's where the name Beeman comes from. I just want to point out that in the lineage from the Revolution to the Civil War and beyond, even after Northern slavery was gradually abolished by the 1820s and 1830s, Connecticut was the only New England state that categorically denied black men the vote throughout this period. So essentially, one thing I want everyone in Connecticut to know is that black men like the Beeman and other free black men were not granted the vote until the 15th Amendment in 1870 granted the vote to freed people in the South. The 15th Amendment forced former slaveholders in the South to enfranchise freed people, but it also forced Connecticut lawmakers to enfranchise black people right here in Connecticut for the first time. What I find so amazing, though, is that despite being denied the vote again and again, the Beemans and other free black leaders in Middletown and throughout Connecticut petitioned every year. They never gave up demanding their rights. This is a notice from 1847. They had a huge meeting at the Cross Street Amy Zion Church to organize a campaign for suffrage. And one result was that in 1847, a referendum actually came up on whether black men in Connecticut could vote. And I'm sorry to say it failed. 80% of Connecticut voters voted no, I'm sorry to say. That didn't change till the 15th Amendment. But I want to quote to you one more document. This is a petition from Middletown that I found from 1839 to the legislature. And it says, "Your petitioners are natives of the state of Connecticut, several of this town, all over the age of 21. Some of your petitioners were soldiers of the American Revolution. They themselves had fought in the Revolution, and all are peaceable and quiet inhabitants." And they go on to say, "Because the rule of the present laws contravenes a great known and acknowledged principle that there should be no taxation without representation. Your petitioners regard the last reason as of much weight. The violation of it was the great moving cause of the Revolution. Some of us, in common with soldiers of a lighter hue, white soldiers, bore arms, fought and bled in a glorious struggle to establish that very principle, which in regard to us has been denied. Have we not reason to complain?" And again, it's so powerful that some of those who were petitioning were actually Revolutionary War veterans themselves. I want everyone to know about what were called colored conventions, for those who don't know about them. This is the minutes on the left of the Connecticut Colored Convention of 1849, and on the right is an illustration of one of these conventions. These were held between 1830 and even after the Civil War. Every northern state had a colored convention. And what I think is so remarkable about this is, even though black men in Connecticut were categorically denied the vote, they still selected delegates among themselves, representatives of their communities. They met in convention, they passed resolutions, they demanded the vote, they demanded an end to the Fugitive Slave Act, they demanded an end to slavery. So essentially you had these independent black congresses not waiting to be enfranchised, but practicing politics and functioning as full citizens long before the government recognized them as such. I also want to point out the remarkable anti-slavery movement against Southern slavery that African Americans in the North, including right here in Portland and Middletown, were leaders of. This is an article about 1834. Black women in Middletown formed one of the very first 3 black women's anti-slavery societies in the United States, formed right in the Cross Street Church in Middletown. And in terms of the Underground Railroad, what I find, and I'll quote that for you, I don't expect you to be able to read it from your seats, but one thing that what I find remarkable is that even Middletown, I was saying that Portland only had 10 black residents before the Civil War. Middletown only had 150 black residents before the Civil War, something like 2% of the city's population, and yet they managed to sustain the Cross Street Church for 2 centuries. They managed to send delegates to the black conventions, and they made the Cross Street Church a stop on the Underground Railroad. And this, what I have on the screen here, is Reverend Jehiel Beeman writing a letter to Frederick Douglass, which Frederick Douglass published in his newspaper, where he openly defies the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, and openly says, quote, "I would inform you that we have had a recent arrival from the land of chains and whips, where the image of the divine being is bought and sold. But thank the good Lord, when he arrived at our office, we at once recognized him as a man and brother." And he goes on to say, "The Underground Railroad, by the way, is in good repair, and our office is open for business by the traveling public at all hours, day or night." So he plays the idea of the Underground Railroad as an actual railroad and openly defies the Fugitive Slave Act in print here. I want to just loop back to the lineage and the legacy of the Civil War, that there were several black Civil War soldiers from Portland. There were about 24 from Middletown, given the size of the larger community there. This is just, I'm skipping ahead because I'm short on time. This is when 1870 black men in Connecticut were finally enfranchised by the 15th Amendment. To go full circle here, and this is just one of so many stories, Thurman Milner was the first black mayor in New England. He was elected mayor of Hartford in 1981. Some people are really shocked to know there wasn't a black mayor in New England before 1981, but his story encapsulates so much of what we're talking about today. His autobiography is called Up From Slavery. He wasn't talking about Southern slavery. He's talking about his family was up from slavery here in Connecticut. His ancestors were enslaved by Philip Mortimer, so they were enslaved in the same household in Middletown as Prince Mortimer. He also had Wangunk ancestry, and within several generations went from slavery to freedom to full enfranchisement to being the first black mayor in New England. So I want everyone to know Thurman Milner's connection to all this. And just bring it back to Portland in my final 30 seconds. This is an article from, I just love this article from the Hartford Courant from 1925. They're saying that the True Vine Baptist Church, Holiness Church had been formed several years earlier. And this is an article, they had a baptism in the Connecticut River, and they said thousands of people came out to watch this baptism in the Connecticut River. That was kind of like an open air baptism for everyone. So again, I just think to think about that 150-year story of freedom that predated the 1920s and the Great Migration, and to think about the legacy and lineage that is represented by the enslaved of New England, the free, the Revolutionary War soldiers, the Civil War soldiers. There's thousands of powerful stories. 20 more seconds. I think this is really, I think this is a really important fact. When you think about all that free African Americans accomplished in the North before the Civil War, there were about 4 million African Americans in this country. 90% of them were enslaved in the South. 10% were free. Half of those were free in the South, and half were in the North. So we're talking about only 200,000 people who really created the Underground Railroad, 200,000 people who created this vast network of free black churches, 200,000 people who created the colored convention movement decades before black enfranchisement. And speaking of that community, I just said that about 200,000 free African Americans were in the South before the Civil War. Mrs. Barbara Armfield spoke to me before my talk, and she brought her husband's grandfather's freedom papers from Virginia from 1857, which if you were one of those 200 free African Americans in the South, you had to carry those at all times to prove that you were not enslaved. And that was law. That wasn't just a precaution, that was law. So before you leave, I hope you get a copy of the Voice of Portland book. I hope you see these amazing free papers from pre-Civil War Virginia, and I hope you keep the conversation going. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jesse. That was amazing. I think we just learned a lot. So now I am going to turn it over to Dre. Dre Farmer is a Portland High School senior in the Black and Latino Studies class at Portland High School, which is very exciting. Yes, we can give a round of applause for that. And also, Dre is one of our student representatives on the Committee on Solidarity in Portland. Yes. Exactly. And this is going to be a really exciting presentation for you because you're going to be able to see how all of this historical information that we've just learned about was turned into a school assignment that is very engaging. So I'm going to invite Dre to come up.
Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. I'm Dre, and this project was, I think, the first one that I worked on for BLS, and it is a fictional story that I created in the form of a Netflix project. That's the whole backbone of what the project is, and it takes things that we learned about the abolitionist movement and slavery, and we put it all into something that is action-packed and not just a boring biography. Mine isn't as action-packed as some of my fellow classmates, and it's a lot more focused on a fictional character that I created. And I want to give one little thing before I actually talk about my story. The events, the historical events that are talked about in this project are not in accurate chronological order because I would not be able to make a story that actually makes sense if I did that, given that I had to make it action-packed too. So this is Florence. She is my fictional character that I created, and we're going to learn a bit about who she is. The first episode talks about her childhood. She was born as a slave, and her father was a preacher. And since her father was a preacher, she was able to read, and she learned how to read, and one day she hears motion outside. She runs out and she sees her father being whipped to a pole, and she tries to save her father, but it's unsuccessful. He does unfortunately pass away, but this is what gives her her spark to work for freedom. And she also has a friend, Alma Davis, who follows her in the story as well. And one night, someone wakes her up and is like, do not say anything. We're gonna get you your freedom. And it's Harriet Tubman. The second episode is going through the Underground Railroad. Mr. Ott wanted us to stress that it's not a real railroad. I think that all of us know that. But it's something that we just had to mention. And while they're trying to make their journey up north, they come about Nat Turner's rebellion with the 50 other slaves, where they're going and they're fighting for their freedom in a violent sense. But Harriet, Alma, and Florence, they don't want people to think that they're a part of this group because they still want to get up north and not be caught. So they're trying to navigate through that, and they do successfully make it out without being tacked onto that group. And unfortunately, as we know, Nat Turner's rebellion does not succeed, and slavery still rages on. But at least Florence can make it through Virginia up to Boston. Episode 3 talks about what she does when she reaches Boston. She, since she's able to read and write, she uses those skills to do something great, and she gets a job with William Lloyd Garrison, who's an abolitionist writer and publisher for The Liberator, and she starts to work towards the emancipation of Black Americans through that. And one day, the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society canceled their meeting because there was an angry mob, and this part is true. That mob did grab Garrison and tried to kill him, basically. It was unsuccessful. The fictional part is when she's the one who calls the cops to disperse all of that, because she's not real. But I'm so sorry. But yeah. However, since she's the one to call the cops, now she has a bigger target on her back, and that's definitely not foreshadowing at all. So episode 4, Florence and Alma, they've been living in Boston for a little bit, she's still writing for The Liberator, and Garrison talks to Florence, and he's like, hey, there is this thing that I think that you should go to, the Seneca Falls Convention, where there's a bunch of women's rights advocates. They all get together, they talk about equality, and Florence, she goes there and she meets Angelina Grunke, and she's heard of her before because Garrison's the one who published her writing and kind of launched her career and stuff like that. But now a friendship has been sparked, which is going to last for a while. And on the train ride back home from the Seneca Falls Convention, she's alone in the train, and then suddenly, bam, head smacked. What's going on? Episode 5. She awakes in the hospital. Someone did attack her. Henry Lyman, this is someone who I also created. He was present at the attack against Garrison, the mob. That's who the target was. And he wanted to take matters into his own hands and do something about that. And that was how he wanted to go about that. But Florence survives, and he's taken into custody by the police. And Alma, who's been following her through all of this, she hasn't really been talked a bit about until now. This is where she comes into play. She is sick and tired of seeing all of this happen, and she cares very deeply for her friend. So she decides that she's going to disguise herself as a man and join the Union Army under the pseudonym David Anderson. And she was going to fight as a black man without being a man. And even though Lyman wanted to silence Florence and stop all of her work and was really dissatisfied with what she was doing, that only made her louder, and she continued to work on all of her articles. this is my last of the episodes. This is originally supposed to be like a 2-people project, but we have an odd number of people in the class, so I did mine solo. So instead of having 8 episodes, I had to do 6. This one is when the Civil War has been won by the Union, and it's all great. But there's still some discussion being held about the 15th Amendment because women also wanted to be included in the 15th Amendment. And there's a lot of debate about this. Frederick Douglass is worried that it won't get passed if women are included too, and that we can always go back for them later. But Florence is of the firm opinion that we need to fight for justice for everybody. And Grimke also helps with her. And unfortunately, that does not happen. The 15th Amendment is only for black men. Women still have to fight for their right to vote. But, you know, Florence, she's a fighter. She continues to fight. Even though the Liberator released its last paper, the next day she starts up her own. It's called the Bluebird, which is actually a symbolism for feminism. And she continues to fight for women's suffrage until the 19th Amendment was ratified. And after that, she lives very peacefully with Alma Davis. And that is the end of my project. This is a little thing that I had to include to get the points. And so was this. And so was this. But thank you all for letting me talk here. I am very proud of this. And thank you, Liz, for inviting me to speak.
Thank you, Dre. That was fun. All right, and we learned more. Okay, did our speaker Deborah make it? Deborah? Yes, you did. Okay, Deborah and I have not met in person yet, so I am so pleased to meet her today and to introduce her to all of you. Reverend Deborah Hopkins is a current member and past president of the Middlesex County NAACP. And hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will let her introduce herself, right? You want to? Yeah. And I'm going to pass it over.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Liz, and to the committee for this invite. And I was kind of shocked. And I was like, okay, what am I going to actually talk about? I believe my Aunt Mary Lou is here.
Yes, she is.
Who is the daughter of Roosevelt Steele Sr., which you're going to hear a little bit more about. Aunt Mary Lou, would you stand up? Did you bring anybody with you? And she was the first black majorette at Portland High School. So I come from a family of history makers. So we have a running joke in my family that I am the proud firstborn granddaughter of Roosevelt Steele Sr., which is a position that I take very seriously in our family. And this is like a running joke that when we have any type of event, I let it be known that I am the oldest and the firstborn. So I am the granddaughter of Roosevelt Steele Sr., who was the first president of the Portland Middletown NAACP, which was formed in 1952. And then I arrive. And I grew up in Portland, actually grew up on High Street in the Anderson Housing, which is no longer there. Attended Portland school system all the way, graduated in 1972. Barbara Shaw and I were neighbors and also childhood friends as well.
And they thought your mother was my mother. I was
Yes,
I
yes.
was the oldest child.
Yes. And the other thing that was so ironic when you pull everything together is that I saw the invite from Liz, and I was just looking at it, and I kind of like just glazed through it. And then I went back to look at it, and I saw this name, Habino, and I said, oh my God. I said, Ann Habino and my mother were good friends. I remember her coming to the house to pick my mother up to take her to community meetings. So everything has come full circle. My mother was, we came from a single parent household and grew up on welfare in Portland. If my mother was here today, she would say Deborah was a good girl, good child, but she was a problem child. Because I was always questioning, because I loved to read, and I just had this whole different outlook on the world. And when I realized that we were on welfare, I said, well, if we're on welfare, why don't we have the best of everything? If everything is free to us, why don't we have the best, you know? And at that time, they would pay for your college education, all these wonderful benefits that you could get. And I just began just so bothered by the whole welfare process, how the welfare process and how we live. So I'm trying to make a long story short. And at 15, I became the youngest member of the Middletown chapter of the Black Panthers. And that's kind of where I started learning my advocacy. Even though my grandfather, we own a house on Newfield Street, which we still own, still fighting to keep it in the family. And in that home, Thanksgiving, Christmas time, any type of get-together, there were men such as Willard McCrae, David Cooper, Senior and Junior, William Sneed, Senior and Junior, Dr. Bridgeford, who was a dentist in Middletown, would always be in the front living room of our house, you know, talking about politics, what was going on in the community, and strategizing. And I would go and I would actually sit by the chair where my grandfather would be talking and holding these meetings. And I always tell people that's where I learned my debate skills, because I could have been more like 8 or 9 years old. And then, you know, so it was just there, always something in me. I would question everything. So being a Black Panther was the only time I ever was suspended from school, because I put posters up down with the establishment, you know, all over. And then they would come, the janitor would come and rip them down, and I would go back and put them back up. And they'd rip them down. And I finally got caught, and I got suspended from high school, just for a couple of days, though. So that was that. But then, you know, I've always had this thing about life and about people. And I remember being part of the Black Panthers, and I was with one of the brothers of the Panthers, and we were going to Farmers and Mechanics Bank, and he did something that changed me forever. We were walking in, and there was a white lady. He slammed the door in front of this woman. And I was so upset, because to me, this woman hadn't done anything. She was just an innocent person, and I did not want to be a part of something that would just, for no reason, treat people differently. So I had to write this long letter, and they released me from being part of the Black Panthers, which is like not an easy thing, but I was so young, I guess they figured, you know, just let her go. So then it was a situation where sometimes you're like at the wrong place, but at the right time. Is how I became the president, the first woman president of the Middletown County NAACP in November of 1989. I happened to be at an event, and John Robinson, who was a councilman in Middletown, the late Dr. David Gifford, and a few other people saw how I handled the situation. They said, you know what? We should get her to run for president. And I'm looking like I am like clueless. No, I don't really want to do this, but they kept talking to me. But before that, I had become the first African-American senior underwriter at Middlesex Mutual Assurance Company, which was a big, big to-do. So they convinced me to become president. I became president, and I just created an agenda for us to really move the needle, as they say. We took on a lot of really tough issues, and I knew that in order for me to get things done, I would have to win the support of the community. Bernie Fields, Patty Vassia, the late, what's his name, the gentleman who owned Pelton's, they were staunch supporters of the work that we were doing with the NAACP. So I took 2 weeks to meet with all the leaders in Middletown, the mayor, Larry McHugh from the chamber, bank presidents. I just did it. And that's how we built the support that we needed. And then there was this issue with affirmative action with the Middletown school system. And we took that on. And that was monumental to take that on. You know, at that time, we really didn't have the support of the school system. So what we did, we kind of outsmarted them. I got a list of all the previous chairs of the Middletown Board of Ed, and I sent letters to each of them saying, we need your support, because I'm thinking people respect their colleagues. And we had the Darlene and Derek Hobson. We had all of them write letters in support of affirmative action. So now there's your colleagues talking to you, like how important this is. And then they were having a Board of Ed meeting in the old Board of Ed in Middletown, which is just a little space. We brought busloads. Every church brought their people in the vans and buses. The news, Channel 3, Channel 8 came. They had to move the meeting into the Middletown High School auditorium. And we were successful in pushing them to agree to start making efforts to hire more minority teachers. That was one of the issues. And then one of the other prominent issues was with Wesleyan University. And I'm trying to remember the date, but I can't off the top of my head, where they had arrested 4 young black males. So we approached that. Anybody here can tell me anything that you would actually arrest for? 4 women, 4 white men, 4 white teenage kids, for walking on Vine Street, which is kind of part of the Beeman Center, that attended the school, but they arrested them. So that was the issue of racial profiling. So we dealt with that, and I have the picture where we actually held a rally at Wesleyan. I see you're writing, you might want it. To address Wesleyan's process, you know, with race, and to encourage them to have more engagement with the community and deal with the whole racial issues. We dealt with hiring for more minorities when people, you know, come into the community to build or establish some type of businesses. So there was a lot going on. And I served 2 consecutive terms as the president, and very proud of the work that we did. And it opened door for other women to not just sit there thinking they had to be secretaries or, you know, just doing all the other stuff, and that they could be women. And I think since then we've had like 4 women presidents, and now it's in the very capable hands of Anita Ford Saunders. But when I heard some of the history, that we're still fighting the same fight today, just in different manner. And, you know, as far as education, we're fighting, and I know you probably heard a lot about charter school, but I want you to not think so much about it being a charter school. What happened, which is happening at record number across the country, that people are losing rights and not even knowing that they're losing a right. What happened when we went to get the charter school, a politician goes in and says, pull that money out. And what I said to our community, it wasn't about the charter school, you're now taking away school choice. So if they take away school choice, what is next? And we need to be mindful, like Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And none of us have the luxury to sit around and think that the same things that were going on before, they're still going on today. The right to decent housing, the right to choose where you want to live, the right to same job opportunities, to be able to bid on construction sites. We see a lot of construction coming into developed communities, yet you will have less than 1% of minorities working on those sites. But yet, those same people that can't get in the sites are the same people paying the taxes. So I just want to leave you with this. It's something that was downloaded to me one day in a meeting, and it guides my principles along with a famous poem. And the poem, I'm going to just give you a quick snapshot out of it, because I think most of you know it. It says, first they came for me. First they came. He said, first they came for the Unionists, and I did not speak because I was not a Unionist. Then they came for the Jew. I did not speak because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you all for listening to this amazing presentation. I'm going to welcome Barbara back up with me to close it out, and then we will have some time for Q&A, okay? Okay, where am I here? So we are going to have maybe 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A, but before we finish up, I just wanted to let Barbara also share a little bit about her mother's involvement in the NAACP, and if you want to talk about David too, since he couldn't be here, you're welcome to. Because, you know, and this is, maybe we'll have to have another presentation about, you know, learning more about the roots of the Middletown, Portland, and the Middlesex NAACP. We've just, you know, found this amazing photo that's up here of the founding president, Mr. Roosevelt Steele, Deborah's grandfather, and we started learning more about the people in the picture. First Selectman Joseph Bransfield is in the picture at that time as well. We all know the Bransfields. So there's a lot to learn. I was excited to hear Deborah introduce me to her Aunt Mary Lou Cooper, who's here, and I'm excited to talk to her. We're hoping that, you know, we can continue to interview our former Portland residents to teach us about our own history. So I'm gonna let Barbara have a minute if you'd like it. Okay.
A few minutes.
Just a couple minutes. And and you can mention the plaque that you brought.
Okay. My mother was involved in the NAACP. As growing up as a teenager, every 7 weeks, it was, I don't know, Deb, do they still do the New England regional meetings?
Yes, they do.
Well, it was my mother, John Freeland, Edward Jackson, Vivian McCrae. Every 7 weeks, they went to these conventions and would bring back to the chapter. She was very much involved, just like Deborah said, things that needed to be done. In the back there, I brought a picture of my mom, and then there is by going to this New England region, that she was a lifetime member of the New England region NAACP that represented the Middletown, Portland chapter of the NAACP. Unfortunately, my brother David could not be here today because he's not doing well. But he also, besides Deborah, he also was the president of the branch. And they really did a lot of things in Middletown that you don't know. And they even, Deborah, remember, they went after the city of Middletown because they were not treating the minorities. And they did not back down. And they helped get more minorities in the city of Middletown.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So before I open it up for questions, I just want to thank again all of our amazing speakers today, and to thank our very generous sponsors for helping us with this program: the Portland Historical Society, Middlesex County Historical Society, the Portland Committee on Solidarity, the Portland America 250 Committee, and the Portland Public Library. And I also want to mention that after, and if there are any questions afterwards, we have refreshments at the back table, and we have the 2 tables that you can visit, and one has the NAACP information along with Anne. You can sign up for, become a member today of the NAACP and find out about our upcoming events for the Committee on Solidarity. We have another Voices of Portland event that's going to be very exciting coming up. Deborah mentioned Anne Hubino, that's my husband's grandmother, and we're going to have an event on her for Asian American Heritage Month. So that's very exciting, and the Historical Society has events coming up. We have our Voices of Portland books, and a lot of good things. So, okay. Juneteenth, we have save the date flyers for Juneteenth, which will be June 20th this year. Erin is showing you all right now. So, great. So we have a lot to look forward to. We just learned a lot. Did anyone have questions for any of the speakers? I don't know if I don't have a wireless mic. So do you want to shout it out? Is that okay? Okay, and I can repeat it too.
This was fascinating. Thank you so much. So my question is maybe just a general statement. I grew up in the area, but I was an adult before I learned that there actually was a slave market in Middletown. I was an adult before I knew that. And seeing all these artifacts and newspaper clippings and pictures, why isn't there, or maybe the question is, how could we as a community build a museum to focus on the history of Black Americans here in Middlesex County? And then also, I never knew the name of the Native Americans that lived in this area. Like, this is the first time I heard their name. I've seen Coggin River and, this and that, but
Yeah.
I think that would be so valuable for the community to have a museum to house all of this information.
You should talk to us after and talk to one of us at the tables, and then maybe in 10 years we'll have a museum. And Caroline?
I just wanted to quickly respond that,
the Gary Red Oak O'Neill, yeah.
Gary O'Neill is an elder of the Wyandotte community. He lives in East Hampton. He's already been a speaker for the Interfaith Coalition of Portland. And he now is, every single time we have a service, a part of that service. You're all very welcome to come. Our next service is on National Day of Prayer, which is the first Thursday of May, declared by the U.S. Congress in 1952. And this year it will be held right here in this room. And there'll be flyers posted all over the town. There'll be announcements in River East and all kinds of social media outlets that will tell you about that service. And you can meet Gary O'Neill and learn more about the White House. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, yeah. Oh, wait, hold on, Alice. Is it about this topic? Because we also have Jesse. We'll come back to you, yeah.
Just a few public service announcements. So Middlesex County Historical Society, has the Vantage Parties that I talked about, slave trade in Middletown. So Middlesex County Historical Society. So I would just say, keep following us online and on Facebook. The Middlesex County Historical Society, the Portland Historical Society. As you can see, in recent years, both historical societies have really tried to get the message out about this largely uncovered, covered history. I'd also say the new African American Cultural Center of Middletown, right? I have the name right. The new African American Cultural Center of Middletown is now a 501c3. If you know Mr. Ray Towns, this is a remarkable story. I wish I had more time to tell it, but Mr. Towns is about, well, I don't think he minds me saying he's about 90, and he was a custodian at Kegwin School, and in the 90s, listen to this, as the custodian, he took it upon himself, no payment, no recognition, to create an African American History Month exhibit every February in the school. I was one of the 6th graders who was there when you created it, and 30 years ago, and he's amassed, hundreds and hundreds of boxes of material on African American history, and this new museum showcases his collection. So support the new African American Cultural Center of Middletown, support the Middlesex County Historical Society, support the Portland Historical Society. Well, right now, the exhibit is up at Kegwin School. You can look on the city's website. It's up for the month of February. The whole collection is being displayed at Kegwin, the former Kegwin School building.
He was at McDonough.
Yeah, and
McDonough in the north end.
right now, if you know where the former Kegwin School building is, that's where it's being displayed in February. And one quick thing, there's flyers on the back table. This Thursday, February 26th, the Middlesex County Historical Society is having a Beam and Triangle descendant speak on Zoom. So I'd love for you to pick up a flyer, visit our website. And Mr. Egan's, yeah. Okay, I'll leave it on that back table there. This is a flyer for the new cultural center. Thank you.
And I'll let John come up too. Yep.
Anyone interested, Gary O'Neill has an opening in 22 minutes at the Wesleyan Potters. He's a master
Just repeat that.
potter and also works in other media. And I am sure that there'll be a lot of information about his background and his connection with his heritage.
Okay, could everyone hear that? Did everyone?
He's speaking at 5 o'clock.
Okay, Gary O'Neill, Red Oak, Wangunk Elder will be speaking at 5 o'clock today. Is that right? At Wesleyan Potters in Middletown. And while we're on the topic of Gary, also, I believe we're planning, is this true, J. Bill? Are we still planning? We're hoping to plan a Portland Indigenous Heritage Month event with Gary Red Oak O'Neill as well in November. Okay.
I'll be brief. I just want to respond to that question. I do genealogical work and historical work in finding these stories across the country. And I think your question is a good one. I think everyone should ask that question. It's common that we don't know these things. Why don't I know these things? I would tell you that it is very intentional. It's not an accident. That's not an accident, that you don't know that. I think that, when I learned about my ties to enslavement and that my name was just the last name of the enslaver that owned my second great grandfather, and then I went to go find those lands where he was buried and learn more about it, it was very empowering, my shoulders lifted back. But when I tell the stories, it's revering. But others hear the stories and they see it as a guilt. And I think that context has caused a lot of this history to be lost and not told, and thus you don't know it. So I think the more you express an interest in it, and the more you visit and go to these programs, I think the more we'll change that dynamic. But I just wanted to introduce that you're asking the right question. We should all ask that question, because it's not an accident, and it's not specific to this region.
I just want to make a quick note that we weren't planning to, so we're recording the presentation. We were planning when we share it to cut it off before the Q&A, but sometimes the Q&A is really good, right? So if people had asked a question and you don't mind your question being included in the presentation that we share, the recording, just come see one of us after and we'll just have you sign a media release form. It'll be simple.
Alice said something.
Alice.
I'm very curious about the 10 African Americans who came in 1661. And how did we find out anything about them?
Okay, Alice's question is, Alice is curious about the 10 African Americans that came in 1661 to Middletown?
To Portland.
To Portland.
The 1860 census.
Wait, I think you need to come up, sorry.
Sorry. The 1860 census said there were 10 free African Americans in Portland in 1860, so we can go on Ancestry.com and pull up those census records. 1661 is when the first people of African descent were brought to Middletown, enslaved from Africa to Barbados to Middletown. And I'm really sorry to say that in the 1660s they didn't record their names. I'm very sorry to say that. There's just a record that, you know, Africans were brought there in slavery. So, I mean, it could be a years-long project. Maybe forensically we could try to get their names, but that was 1661. Yeah.
I'm curious, what did they do? Were they enslaved? Were they
Yes,
working,
yes,
you know,
yes,
for
they were.
farmers? Or,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think we might have time for one or two more questions, and if a lot of other people have questions, just hold on to them and we'll address them at another time. Yes, come back, because I don't see any other hands.
So this is actually not a question, this is an invitation to everybody. If you are unhappy with the direction of our federal government, if you're unhappy with this current regime, with the chaos and with the cruelty of our current federal administration, I invite you all to a peaceful protest. It's the last Saturday of March. No King's Day, March 28th. Right here in Middletown, we're organizing a peaceful protest. We're gonna, you may have noticed people protesting on Washington and Main on Saturdays from 10 to 12. We'll be leaving the corner at 11:30 a.m. on Main and Washington. We're marching down to Union Park, by South Church. We'll hear speakers, music. It's been approved by the mayor. We have permission from the Middletown Chief of Police, who's awesome. We're not anti-police. They are supporting us. So we'll be marching down the middle of the street the last Saturday of March 28th. No kings in America. So everyone's invited.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other announcements, Caroline? And then I think after that we'll break for refreshments.
I'm wondering if anybody here has noticed that as you go over the bridge, it goes start down Main Street in Middletown on the left, where you can't make the left-hand turn anymore, and there's a sign, a street sign, and it says.
It was John, Caroline. John made that happen. Yeah, John, yeah. The first honorary street sign in Middletown, is that correct?
Yeah, but there are other people, Hero and Dr. Nasta, that were involved in that.
Can I have all the speakers come up for a photo and everybody else go, sorry, it's so crowded, but enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Want me to try?
Yeah, oh no, it's fine. No, they're good. I think you heard me. Oh, the speaker, you can hear me?
Just gotta get Jesse together.